Hi and welcome back to our online video tutorials for income generation in schools. My name is Justin Smith, the owner of Chameleon Training and Consultancy, and this online tutorial will take you through the essential elements of writing a successful fundraising bid and also some of the pitfalls you ought to try and avoid. So if you recall in earlier tutorials, I talked about the importance of avoiding an over-reliance on grant funding to support the projects in your school. You're less likely, I'm afraid, these days to find a grant funder who's willing to fund 100% of your project. They'll look for you to have contributed in some way. Now that doesn't necessarily have to be hard cash. They may be looking for some volunteer time or expertise or contributions in kind. If you take the Heritage Lottery Fund, for example, they actually put a value against the time given by volunteers, cash value per hour. Also, think about other in-kind contributions. So here's an example. Perhaps you may be looking for funding for running a basic skills ICT class after school for parents and children to learn alongside each other. It's a very valid project, why not? So your contribution to the project could be cash in addition to the value associated with the IT equipment you're providing, the room you're providing, the refreshments, etc. So consider these. Many funders will of course expect some sort of physical contribution from you in terms of cash, but don't overlook or underestimate the other ways that you can contribute towards the project. So when it comes to grant funding, you may be surprised to hear that there's over £1.5 billion of funding available every year for schools and charities to bid for from grant funders and trustees. However, it probably also doesn't come as much of a surprise to you to learn that most trusts and grant funds are heavily oversubscribed. And to give you an example, the Garfield Western Anniversary Trust Fund in 2018 received applications totalling £200 million from 2,300 organisations. They managed to fund 150 of those with their £11 million that they had. Now that 11 million was more than double the fund they initially put aside. So that gives you an example of the scale of the challenge that faces us, but it isn't all doom and gloom, far from it. Actually, there's an awful lot that you can do to give yourself a best chance of getting that funding and load the dice in your favour. For example, a significant number of applications are for grants that actually the applicant is ineligible for. To give you an example, it's incredible to think that some figures released by the National Lottery showed that almost 46% of applicants at one stage for its Reaching Communities Fund were rejected due to ineligibility. This is extraordinary. It means that almost half didn't meet the stated criteria. That's an appalling waste of time and money. So, it brings me to my 5 essential top tips for writing a grant application. First and foremost, as we've just heard, make sure your project meets the eligibility criteria set out by the grant funder. It'll be on the website, it'll be on their application forms, there's no excuses for getting that wrong. And actually, if you're a little bit unsure because your project is different, and actually being different is a good thing in terms of funding, then phone the funder up, have the conversation, engage with them, build a relationship. That's going to be very valuable to you going forwards anyway. Number 2, demonstrate real need for your project and be clear about the impact that you can make. So the days of receiving funding for projects which were just nice to have are over a long way, okay? So you need to prove that your project really needs their support. Thirdly, gather evidence to back this up. Ask for supporting evidence from the local authority, from parents, from students and other stakeholders and beneficiaries. Demonstrate engagement with your communities outside of school. Perhaps you could run a pilot project which demonstrates an impact on a small number of students that you would then like to roll out throughout the rest of the school. That's a great way. You could conduct surveys online and paper surveys to again demonstrate that you've engaged with people and these are their views and this is the reason why you want to go down this particular route. Fourthly, demonstrate great value for money. Clarify your contributions as we talked about earlier and take the funder through your fundraising journey so far. They will much prefer to support schools and charities that embark upon a holistic approach to fundraising. So they want to know what you're doing and how this fits into the bigger picture. And finally, avoid assumptions. Use plain English and active language. So just because you know your context and the issues that you face doesn't mean that the funder will, so be really clear and concise about that. Use plain English, try to steer away from some of the education speak that we use every day in our lives. And in terms of active language, I'm thinking about using words such as we will, or we expect, or this is necessary because, rather than hopefully or we might have. It sounds obvious, but I see a number of different grant applications that use these words, and it obviously doesn't set the funder in the right frame of mind. Remember, the person reading your application probably won't know your school or your context, so think from their perspective, put yourselves in their shoes, and perhaps get a third party to read through your application before you send it. And finally, my last piece of advice in terms of writing a fundraising application for funding would be to consider all of your fundraising activities. They all work in your favour from the grantee's perspective. So in other words, the funder would love to hear about everything that you're doing in school to make your project happen. They want to help you get it over the line, okay? So show them what you're doing to get that far. The days of having a grant 100% funded for your project are long gone. You need to demonstrate now that your project is worth supporting. So I hope you enjoyed this introduction tutorial to grant funding. Deeper dive sessions are coming too, so we can explore this topic in more detail. Thank you.